Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low.
Hi, j-fallon, and this is the Slippery Slope. So I want to talk about a couple of stories that come up very Australian orientated. I did consider talking about the war going on. Obviously, Israel, Iran, and America has dived straight in as well. Maybe not straight in, but anyway. So they're in the mix now as well. But mate, there's just so much going on over there, and so much commentary going on about it as well. I thought I'm just going to keep my nose out of it at the moment. There are things happening at home which are just which need people to sit up and take notice of what's going on. I think it's a reflection of uh, how weak, how feckless our government leadership is, our current prime minister and the people that he's surrounded himself with. People like what's her name, Penny Wong. Um, her and Albanese. I don't think they're great leaders at all. But unfortunately, it seems like we in Australia have that kind of weak, feckless leadership. Through every tier, every tier of government that we have at the moment. So a couple of different issues that are happening in Queensland, and our governments talk about was it bridging the gap or closing the gap with Indigenous issues, and they implement different policies, and so often it just it doesn't bridge the gap, it doesn't close the gap, it just divides. It makes the gap worse than it was previously. That's what it seems like to me, anyways. Going to go through a couple of different stories. Okay, so Queensland public drunkenness law reversal. So one of an Indigenous elders said this will bring racial profiling. A proposal to make public drunkenness illegal in Queensland would lead to police racially profiling Indigenous people, an elder warns. It comes after Queensland Minister Dan Purdy flagged the state government was considering making public drunkenness illegal again, less than a year after decriminalising it. What is going on? Yeah, so Purdy said the former Labor government's decision to remove public drunkenness as an offence made it hard for police to do their jobs properly. To me, that sentence doesn't even make sense because as a police officer, to do your job properly, you just work within the confines of the law. Then you do your job properly. So, public drunkenness, removing the decision to remove it as an offence has made it hard for police to do their job properly. As long as you're working within the confines of what the law says, well, then you are doing it properly. It doesn't, yeah, anyway. The Chris Foley government, to me, that just makes an excuse. It's just giving police, an excuse for bad behaviour, I feel. The Chris Foley government is listening to communities who are alarmed that Labor's watering down of the laws has led to more antisocial behaviour and crime in our streets, Purdy said. Our government is working with the Queensland Police Service to ensure they have the laws and resources they need to keep people safe. It's always a worry to me when the government starts talking about, well, it's for your safety. We're bringing in these laws for your safety. At a SNAP community meeting in Musgrave Park, Brisbane, elders warned the reversal would create open season for police to target Aboriginal communities. Brisbane Murray Action Group organiser Adrian Baragaba said such laws had historically given police the discretion to arrest people they deemed were behaving drunkenly. He claimed these discretionary powers had disproportionately been used on homeless and Aboriginal communities. Baragaba said that these laws had previously not been applied equally in party destinations such as the Valley and Surfers Paradise on the Gold Coast. It says we feel like we're being criminalised, stereotyped, marginalised, and picked on by the police. when they've been given too much power. These laws will criminalize our people again, and our human rights will be denied, as the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody found over 30 years ago. In 1991, the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody recommended decriminalising public drunkenness, but Queensland was the last state to do so in late 2024. Queensland Council for Civil Liberties President Michael Cope said this reversal would take civil rights back 34 years. Cope said Queensland police could already detain drunk people if they were violent, threatening, or a risk to their safety or the safety of someone else. That's very true. Alcoholism and alcohol abuse should be dealt with via health and social support systems rather than the criminal justice system. The offence of public drunkenness effectively criminalises poverty and has a disparate application to Indigenous people. Okay, so my personal experience with this law when I was a police officer working in general duties, a couple of incidents I can think of is, so obviously not just being public drunkenness, but also let's talk about drinking in public. In Queensland, so when I was in general duties, it's actually illegal to consume alcohol in public. So we go around, when I was working up in the far north, we'd go around to some areas and you'd be going around parks and making sure people are just behaving properly. You know, there's no unruly behavior, antisocial behavior. Anyway, I remember seeing a group of Indigenous people there and they were consuming alcohol. There was nothing unruly going on. They were just sitting, literally just sitting and drinking around, at a table there. VB of all things, so maybe there was an offence. But anyway, so we went up, confiscated the beer that was there, that was unopened, I remember, and poured out the other cans that were opened. And at the time, I thought, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. It just, you know, they're not doing anything. It just seems a bit pointless. Anyway, I remember, I can't remember if it was the same day or it was a couple of days later, maybe. We were around in a similar vicinity in the park there, and there was a group of or Caucasian Australians, older. They're actually a bit older, probably, around the 60s kind of thing. I would say more the upper echelon of society. There was a lot of nice cars sitting around. They were having a nice little barbecue picnic in the park, celebrating. I can't remember what they were celebrating, but there was plenty of champagne. There's plenty of champagne flowing. The other officer went up and just had a talk. Initially, I just thought, oh, yeah, we're going to go up and talk to him about drinking, consuming alcohol in public. No, nothing was said, nothing at all. It was just, hey, he's going, what he's doing. It's a good day for a picnic, barbecues, and it's very nice. And then that was it, on our way. And I'm standing there thinking, wow, okay, so in Australia, as long as you're a group of Caucasian Aussies with a bit of money, and the champagne's flowing, that's all good. No one was concerned about, possibly driving off under the influence later on or anything like that, because there's plenty of alcohol being drunk. But none of that seemed an issue. But then for the other party, the Indigenous group who were sitting there, and they were, like I said, there was nothing unruly going on. They were literally just sitting there having a drink. We had to tip their beer out, apparently. So you'd see that. I saw that quite a few times happening, and it always really got under my skin. Not that I particularly disagreed with, I don't disagree with the drinking in public. I just really, really got under my skin when it was this group can't, but then this group, oh, that's all good. We'll just go up and have a little chat with them, ask them how their day is, and then continue on our merry way. Well, because, they're drinking high-end champagne and wine. That's all different, apparently. So it really did get under my skin seeing that. So I see this is the issue when you have these kinds of laws come in and then you leave it up to the discretion of the police, because it's so often it goes back to their own personal biases and how they think, instead of just looking at different groups, and rather, are people actually being unruly? Is there actually anything, any anti-social behavior going on? Oh, no, it's not. Well, then we'll just leave groups, no matter the color of their skin or whatever, we'll just leave them all alone. But no, it just comes up to, oh, well, Indigenous people drinking beer, nah, that's all got to go out the door. But Caucasian people drinking nice wine and champagne, that's all good. So it really did get under my gut. So this is the problem I think that you have when you allow these kind of discretionary powers and give them over to police. It ends up it ends up looking more like racial discrimination. That's what it ends up. But I didn't want to just focus on this story because I really don't understand why liberals have decided this has only gone on. They've only reversed this law a year ago. So why overturn it a year ago? So why bother just, reversing it a year later and then using this excuse, well, police can't possibly do their jobs properly if we don't have this law. It's making it too hard for them. It's making it too hard for police to work within the confines of the laws that are currently, the restrictions that are currently in place. They need to work outside the boundaries that are there. But anyway, let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Discrimination on the other end, which I think is just as disgusting. Just as disgusting. So, what's happened is primary school students in remote areas are being turned away from taxpayer funded charter flights with empty seats because they are not Indigenous. Derek Lord, Air Traffic Services reporting officer at Normanton Airport in northwest Queensland, said he regularly sees 20-seat government chartered planes, government chartered, in other words, taxpayer taxpayer funded flights. So government chartered planes arriving with fewer than half the seats occupied. Lord said his two sons, who boarded a school in Charters Towers near Townsville, were not allowed to board the planes because they were only available to Indigenous recipients of the AB study scheme. Without access to the planes, it takes them up to 6 days to get home for the holiday period, taking buses and planes via Townsville and Cairns. Lord had tried paying for seats on the planes, but the booking company that now does it, which is overseas, an overseas booking company. Typical government, hey, typical. They refuse to allow our children to get on because they don't meet the criteria. This is what he's told Ben Fordham's 2GB or 2GB Ben Fordham, however, whatever. It's taxpayer funded, and even if we were willing to pay, the plane is coming here. It's been paid for by everyone's taxes, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. The kids are from the same town. And by the way, we're in the middle of a flood crisis and we couldn't get in or out. So there was no way to get our kids home unless it's on a private charter ourselves or Rex, the airline Rex. And Rex can be up to 2 or 3 weeks waiting for a seat. I believe that's the gentleman there who's talking about it with the Catter Party's what's his name, Robbie Catter in the cowboy hat, the cowboy hat there. Lord said the half-empty flights were a sign that the system is broken. The gap is not a gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous per se. It's regional versus non-regional, and I think he might have a point. If you actually compared the two, I think you'd find that many of the non-Indigenous kids and families have the same disadvantages as Indigenous people in rural and remote communities. This is the problem, the way I see it. Our governments, they have all these big initiatives. What is it now? The closing the gap or bridging the gap rubbish. The problem is with the closing the gap initiative, they see it as, generally society may sit up there, and then they see it as, Indigenous culture, society may sit down on this level. But instead of just, encouraging Indigenous communities to raise their standard of living, maybe what they see as a lower standard of living, and raising it up to the level of other Australian communities, it seems like they bring in these initiatives and like these flights and that, and what they do with closing the gap, and they would rather lower the standards of the other communities, make things harder for other communities and then they bring up the Indigenous community just a little bit and then tell us all that they're just closing the gap. They're making things better for Indigenous people. All you're doing as an Indigenous person, I'll tell you, you dweeb governments, you're not making it better for Indigenous communities. You're making it worse because it encourages discrimination. It makes Indigenous communities as a whole look uh, some things that I've seen going on in my own community. It really stinks of racism and makes Indigenous people look racist towards other Australians, where what's really happening is they're just implementing Indigenous groups are just implementing policies, government policies, and utilizing government policies that sometimes they have to utilize, they have to implement to get funding. But then it causes discrimination and it just makes the gap widen because it makes everyone feel like they've been discriminated against and no one's really closing the gap. And it is, in my opinion, racism. You can call it reverse racism and tell us, well, it's all good for reverse racism because I know all the theory about this crap, because we had all this racism supposedly over, 100 and something whatever years. Well, then we're allowed to have reverse racism now, and it's nothing illegal about it because we're trying to close the gap. It's a load of rubbish. Racism is racism. We shouldn't be doing it because it just discriminates against everyone in reality, and it makes things harder for people who are struggling financially, who are on the lower echelons, who are living in remote communities, who maybe don't have access to all the things that you would have in the cities. It makes things harder for these people anyway. So it doesn't really help all Australians, and it just causes division between groups, between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. But sometimes it seems like that's the goal. That's the goal for the government. They tell us that they want equality, but their idea of equality isn't raising people up to the standard of the other people. No, no, it is dragging one group down so they can be lower. That's it's not just with Indigenous groups. That goes across the board. This is what they do with people who maybe aren't working, and they're not working because they choose not to work, and then they don't have money, and then they're complaining about not being able to eat or not being able to do things. But they've chosen not to work. They've chosen not to go and put their hand to the plow and make money so they can support themselves. But instead of encouraging these people and putting programs in place that would, you know, get people out to work, they would rather bring down the rest of society and say, oh, well, we'll just take the things off the other people and spread it out and give it to all these other people who are just lazy and just don't want to work. That's not equality. That's not equality. And I personally stand by the saying from Paul, which says, if you don't work, you don't eat. A little harsh. It's a little harsh, but I think it would keep everyone in good stead if they remembered that. Listen, I don't think any of these policies are good for Australians as a whole. And I think if we want to move on as a nation and get beyond the problems of the past that we've had, the racism and discrimination that we've had in the past, I think we should forget about these discriminatory laws that we always want to bring in when it comes to public drunkenness and drinking in public and this kind of thing, because then it does just open up a gap where police just go picking on Indigenous people or homeless people. The poor always get dragged into these things, undoubtedly. So it just wedges the gap between these parts of society. And then we shouldn't have these things where, Indigenous kids get a flight that's taxpayer funded, but then someone else who lives in the same community, because they're not Indigenous and because they've done the right thing, mind you, and haven't claimed being Indigenous, which there's a lot. And I've seen it. It's disgusting. There's a lot of people out there now who just go and tick the box and say, "Oh, yep, I claim to be Indigenous," and it's because of rubbish like this, because they get free flights. You're just making the problem worse. But this is what government does. Nothing in life is free. Someone is always paying. This is what the government always leaves out when they're saying, when they put in all these, trying to implement all these government initiatives. They make it like it's all just free money. You know, it's all good. The magic beans are going to feed us forever. It's all fine. No. Someone is actually paying for everything. And at the moment, it's the taxpayer. We shouldn't have these kinds of initiatives. It doesn't close the gap. It just wedges a divide in our society. That's all my opinion. I'm j-fallon. Please go and check out my music on Spotify, iTunes, all that kind of thing. And please make sure you like and subscribe. And that would be greatly appreciated. My name's j-fallon. This is The Slippery Slope. This is just my opinion. Thanks for listening.
They just fuel a desire that will take me higher. I'm on fire because nothing's gonna bring me down. Nothing's gonna bring me down. Nothing's gonna stop me now. No more demons to be done. No nothing's gonna focus on the goal. Nothing's gonna stop me now. Nothing's gonna hold me down. Got my eye on the prize. Gonna say